For R for radiates, I literally asked him if his shortness of breath radiated anywhere. Welcome to the first dose of... The first dose. That's actually cute. Maybe I'll give it. Welcome to the first episode, or maybe I'll call it the first dose, of Push Dose. So... we have a great podcast for those of you that came to our YouTube channel without listening to the podcast called EMS 2020. It became one of the most popular podcasts on iTunes and Spotify. And so people were kind of sad when we went down to every other week. So as a way to counter that, and also as a way to address our huge backlog of calls that we get for EMS 2020. By the way, EMS 2020 is a podcast where we review real world calls. We decided to create Push Dose. So with Push Dose, we are able to take calls that maybe can't fill out an entire EMS 2020 episode, which typically ranges from 1.5 hours to 2 hours, but are still important nonetheless. So we're going to try and review calls and try and get right to the point and get the information out to you. Also, we should be able to use the visual medium of YouTube to everybody's advantage, so that should be a lot of fun. Plus, it might make for some funnier editing. So let us know what you think about Push Dose in the comments below, and be sure to hit that like button if you like it and subscribe so that you can keep watching them, and of course use the bell icon so you don't miss them when they come out. So with that, we'll go ahead and bring in Spencer and go through today's call. All right, Spence, I'm bringing you up.
Boom!
I can edit you to just like pop in and go pow right on the screen.
Yeah.
Also,
like
today's
push
episode,
dose of epi to the heart. Just boom! I'm here.
I have to admit something to you. My original name for this was actually going to be Push Dose Episodes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know. But I decided against it. Anyway, today's episode is brought to you by Jump Medic. We'll talk more about Jump Medic and their premium first aid kits later. All right, so the themes in Push Dose are going to be a little bit less involved than EMS 2020. So on EMS 2020, we often make like pop culture references to change the names of the characters. Like we've done Step Brothers before. Spencer usually does like nerdy Dungeons and Dragons stuff. But...
By less involved, you mean lazy. Go on.
Exactly.
I hear you.
Exactly. So lazy that in order to name the characters, I'm bringing back the animal wheel to name everybody.
The random name generator.
Because we have to keep things anonymous, right? Because, we do try and protect those involved and their privacy. And this is one of the ways that we're going to do it. And our EMS 2020 listeners may remember the animal wheel from the early days. So there is this.
Hey, do me a favor. Just give us one push.
Did you get it?
Thank you. Yes, and it was cow. Perfect.
For anybody wondering why I keep looking down, by the way, that's where my laptop, that's where Spencer's face is. So I'll try and maintain eye contact, though, so we can have a
below
personal
him,
connection.
as it should be.
Right. What I like about this is actually going to be kind of a standard chest pain call. Oftentimes on EMS 2020, we tend to take the more complicated calls like, the person has running bowler's hat sign or something that Spence, I think, actually makes up. He claims he researches this stuff. I don't think he does. But today, we're actually going to be starting with a very simple basic chest pain call, and it's going to give us kind of an opportunity to go back over that ground level stuff that a lot of our listeners are going through. I know a lot of you guys are in your paramedic internships or in paramedic school, and you may find this episode to be a little bit more relevant. It's the stuff that we all like to pretend we know in and out, and what can happen is you tend to believe that you know the basics really, really well, and then you stray from them when you really, really shouldn't. And this is a great call to kind of go back and start talking about assessment basics on an ALS level and kind of moving from there. And kind of some things that can go wrong when you're kind of new. So our call giver is a rookie. They are in their internship. They were actually kind of excited when they got the call, when it came in as a chest pain call. Because they're like, yes, I got this one down. Chest pain's easy. This is going to be great. And then it did not go great because they didn't take into account the patient.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Which is kind of the main lesson of this entire story here. So yeah, we're going to talk about talking to patients, and we might even teach you about teaching. It kind of depends what we have time for, but Spencer, here we go. The call comes from us from the intern, and their name is going to be... All right.
So the intern... All right, got it.
Yep. I don't know. Now it's going nuts. I don't know what this thing's doing. But yes, all right. So the intern's name is Cal. And let's talk a little bit about the intern. They're obviously currently on their internship. Anyway, they're currently on their internship. If you're not familiar with paramedic school, depending on where you get your paramedic certification or license rather, it's usually a 2-year degree. And so it's usually about 2 years of school. And then towards the end of that, you are on an ambulance for some portion of it.
Quick correction. Not all of them are 2-year programs. Some of them are shorter.
Some states have 2-year programs because they require an associate's degree. Some are much shorter. That is correct. Alrighty. So, but this person is on a ambulance. They are the third person on an ambulance that's operated by a private ambulance company. And they are in the, okay, now you try being the paramedic in charge phase. Because usually when you start your internship, you kind of start with skills, right, Spence? Like you start like, hey, like learning your IVs and learning those kind of things. You're not really responsible for the assessment because I feel ridiculous just holding this wheel around and just explaining complex things. But yeah, you don't start people out because the assessment's really the important part, right? Because you can be great at IVs. You can be great at putting on 12 leads. You can be great at med math. But if you don't know when to use those things, it doesn't matter. So the assessment is the important part, and using your assessment and then guiding your resources around you, which is really what paramedics do. Anyway, but the intern as Cal has been doing really well with nailing like their interventions. They feel very strong in those interventions, but they're kind of nervous in this phase because they didn't quite go to 0 to hero route, which, by the way, the 0 to hero route is, so to become a paramedic, you have to initially be at least an EMT. And some people will get their EMT and they practice for a while and then they add their paramedic later. Some people will get their EMT and then immediately go in the paramedic school with no field experience. And that's what we call the 0 to hero route. And there's kind of there's a really, I would say, bad stereotype of the 0 to hero route that really shouldn't be there. And that is that they often are worse than those who had some time in the field. And while it's true that those that have time in the field are probably going to have a leg up when it comes to internship and getting out into the world, if you look at the total time spent in the career, it's a
minor
wash.
Yeah, I agree overall with the assertion that like it doesn't matter in the end.
It's a wash. So,
all right.
Yeah, in the end. Alrighty. So.
In the end, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, in the end, it doesn't even matter. So they didn't do quite the 0 to hero route, but they said the time that they were basic was about 6-7 months and they didn't run a lot of calls. So it was virtually the 0 to hero route. All right, next up is the lead on the car. This is the intern's preceptor, and they are going to be Turkey.
All right. Cow, intern, turkey, lead.
Yep.
Got it.
So a little bit about Turkey. Turkey is the preceptor, like we mentioned. Turkey has about 4 years of experience as a paramedic with about 1 year experience prior to that as an EMT. All of it with the same ambulance company.
Gotcha.
So they have a lot of knowledge, generally only steps in when necessary on this internship to take over a call from the intern. And they're a big fan of EMS 2020, and they're the reason the intern listens to EMS 2020. I figured that was an important note.
Yeah.
So there's one other person on the car that we need to talk about, and that is the partner, the EMT partner that works with. So typically this agency runs a paramedic EMT crew. This is the EMT, and their name is going to be, let's kind of randomly spin down here, and then it's going to be... Nope, can't do cow. Already taken.
Cow 2.
Goat. They're the greatest of all time. That's the best name you possibly have.
The goat. Nice.
All right.
Excellent.
We're going to put the wheel away for a little bit. It will come back. Don't worry.
Hey, Chris, I just want to let you know, like the moo we get into this call, I'm really gobbling up the names that you've come up with. They're not bad. I'm just saying. Yeah, this is solid work.
That was bad. All right. So a little bit about Goat, the EMT partner. Goat has been an EMT for about 1 year and also happens to be in Cal's class and is a classmate of Cal's. They're not on. They're in their internship as well, but not today. They're on an intern. They intern on another car, so they do the same thing that I used to do, which. This is not good work-life balance, but it's how I got through school is I worked A side, I interned B side. So I was always at work 7. Yeah, you too. Yeah. Yep. 7 days a week I was at work. So it was great.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
was not great. Let's talk about the system that they're in a little bit. So the system that they're in is a private ambulance system that is described as excessively busy. They're a dynamic deployment system, which means they move post to post. They don't have stations. They are privately owned, so they work in conjunction with the fire department. The main reason that they are busy is more due to the staffing level. It's not necessarily an area with a ton of call volume. It's just an area with a moderate amount of call volume and not a lot of units out there. So there's that. They do typically respond with the fire department. However, the fire department may not respond even on code 3 calls. This is largely due to availability because, again, this staffing issue is not just with the private ambulance company. They have a 911 system that's just kind of outgrowing their current resources. So even the fire department's like, yeah, I don't have a unit for you. I don't know what you're going to do. I apologize. And they also have the ability, or at least nobody stops them from doing this, to kind of decide their own response mode. So even if dispatch comes out and says, hey, it's a code 3 call, they may come back and say, yeah, we looked at the call notes. I'm going to call it a code 1. And then they just takes such a long time to get there. They get canceled. So anyway.
Oh,
yeah, there's that. So anyway, they typically work 12-hour shifts. 6 to 8 calls per day is the usual. And local hospitals in this call, not very important because for this call, the closest hospital can do everything they need to. It's also the patient's preference. Hospital choice is not going to be a factor.
All right.
So, all right, let's get into the call. So the call drops in at 0930. So this is a well-known apartment complex in the area. The call comes in as a shortness of breath with chest pain that is worse today.
Did they give any more, like worse today, meaning it's been going on for some time, or any more details?
No, that would be awesome if they had those details, if dispatch said how long, but they don't. The caller is actually the patient's wife, and the response takes like less than 4 minutes. There's no fire department that's currently assigned to them because there's plain none available in their area.
Gotcha. Right.
So, and even by the time they arrive, right before they go in, they check about a fire unit and they say, nope, there's still none assigned to you. Let us know if we can cancel the request, period. So the scene, the wife answers the door, which opens into the living area of the apartment. The wife's name is, check this out. Yeah, well, hold on.
There's a second page?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there is.
Wow.
All right.
Alligator says.
Alligator.
All right.
All right. So Alligator answers the door.
Alligator.
Alligator answers the door and lets people into a apartment that's described as somewhat dirty, dark, and cluttered apartment. Not like dangerously like a minefield cluttered, but not like don't invite guests over.
Potentially. It's still water and there's like debris floating in it. But you think it's safe to come to the water hole to drink.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
It also smells strongly of cigarettes. Love that smell. All right. The patient is in a recliner and says, hey, guys, over here. That kind of stuff. So he seems at least somewhat jovial, but we all know this guy. And the patient's name is? Parrot. Patient. Yeah, Parrot the patient. Or Patient the Parrot. All righty.
All right.
So patient, parrot, the parrot, patient, parrot.
No, hold on.
Polly parrot.
Matthew Parrot. Nah, you know what? I'm sad. That one made me sad. That wasn't good.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
All right, so Turkey, who is the one who knocked on the door, steps aside to allow Cow to go assess the patient first and establish themselves as PIC by peeing in the corners and claiming this as their area to make sure dominance is known.
Exactly. Dominance is important here. Yeah.
All right, Spence, so let's kind of talk about the basic approach to this.
Because cows are known for their dominance.
This is going great. All right, but Spence, let's talk about the basic approach to this patient, having only the dispatch knowledge of shortness of breath and chest pain that is worse today. Where do we start?
We have some information from dispatch, chest pain, shortness of breath, but we don't have by any means a full story. And so I find in these situations, it's best to come in with a open-ended question like, what's going on today, sir?
Yeah.
And let the patient kind of guide where you kind of set your approach.
Yeah. And I think, and I agree with you. That's the way I started. Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes if you ask an open-ended question, you get a really you get a dumb answer.
Well, back in 1985.
Yeah. It's like, well, that doesn't help me at all. But the pitfall of asking too specific of a question is that you can really easily miss things, right? Like if you come in and be like, hey, how's your chest pain and shortness of breath? And they answer that question, they may have also been having other symptoms that had you asked, hey, what's going on today, you would have gotten those. But because you only asked specific questions, they only gave you specific answers. The good thing also about asking the patient questions directly is we start every assessment the same way, right? You start with your ABCs.
Yeah. Because
the idea here is that, I mean, the story's always important. History is one of the most important things you're going to get out of this scene. But if your patient has a life-threatening injury that needs to be addressed now, you have to address that now and kind of get the story later, right? Like if you go in there and someone's clearly not breathing, they're clearly hypoxic, don't sit there and be like...
Don't open with like, so you sick? When you walk in the door and you first see the patient, that's really when your assessment starts because you can see... Hey, look at their skin color. Are they looking at me? Are they talking to me? You know, are they breathing fast? A lot of that stuff you can kind of see without actually having to put a numerical value by it.
100%.
And then going in there, if you don't see anything that, you know, they're not laying there blue and stiff, dead, then you can go like, sir, what's going on sir?
Yeah.
Sir?
Sir, are you okay? Yeah.
How long has he been like this?
All right. So moving on with the call, our Cal, our intern, nails that. Actually, just starts off with a good open-ended question without any issue. The patient states simply that he's having chest pain. That's all the patient really says. The wife then chimes in and says, yeah, but he also can't catch his breath after just like walking to the bathroom, which normally is not a problem for him at all. As if he goes to the bathroom like a champ all the time. Normally he's got this. So anyway.
Gotcha.
Right. And she even says this is the worst that she has ever seen him.
Okay.
All right. So Spencer, what's on your mind? What do you want to do next at this point? You've got.
Okay. So.
Yeah.
So this is sort of, you know, like there is more history that I definitely want to uncover.
Yep.
Because there's a couple things like this is the worst he's ever been indicates that there's a history of maybe perhaps similar events.
Yeah.
I want to find out more about. Per his wife. And I want to find out more about that. Hey, which started first, the chest pain or the shortness of breath, or did they start at the same time? There's a lot of kind of history questions that I want to go down, but there are assessment pieces that I would want to have accomplished at the same time. And so this is where if you're the PIC, you kind of continue asking those questions and you direct your team to go do the things that you would like assessed. For instance, hey, gobble me up some lung sounds and, get me a 12 lead other person.
Goat. Give me a 12 lead.
Goat, get me a 12 lead.
Goat, give me some vital signs. Yeah.
So that's where I would go.
I love your point, man, because I think this is the hard part, especially like with cows coming out of school, you get really used to those sheets, right? Like the NREMT sheets. But the problem with sheets is you tend to have things in a line item order. And that's kind of what you tend to remember. And you try to go step by step, when in reality, the best thing for a lot of these patients, especially patients who could be a STEMI patient, is to try and accomplish things at the same time. So I'm 100% with you. Start going down your more detailed history and your assessment, that kind of stuff, while you have your partners grab that first set of vital signs, get the 12 lead done. You can have all that occurring while you're talking to the patient. Tell the patient what's going on, though. Just be like, hey, I'm going to have my partners check out your vital signs. They're also going to run an EKG. It's going to be some stickers on your chest. While they're doing that, I'm going to keep asking you some questions, okay? And then go from there.
Yeah. Skill sheets aside.
Yeah.
I hope this stays. The OPQRST questions, or OPQRSTI, as I like to throw the little I at the end there. Little
What's the
French,
I? Is that
I don't know.
Interventions?
Yeah, interventions. Like,
cool.
Hey, what did you do about this?
Gotcha.
How did you try and solve your own problem before you called us? Because people do weird stuff, and that's when you learn to I took 800 ibuprofen to try and deal with the chest pain. Okay. Well,
you did you?
All right.
Gotcha.
The fifth of vodka didn't help. Weird.
But it makes sense. What else are you going to wash the ibuprofen down with?
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
You need some. Yeah. OPQRST questions is actually a really, like, it was made for chest pain.
It
because
was.
that's essentially really all you need to know right there, minus, I guess, maybe a couple extra things.
Well, it reminds me of the Glasgow Coma Scale in the sense that OPQRST was, I mean, really, it's almost tailor-made for chest pain. But we've taken it and we've applied it to so many other things. And it is useful in a lot of other cases. But GCS is kind of the same way, right? Like that was something that was primarily invented for the purpose of head trauma. But then we use it to like assess all mental statuses across the board. And it just doesn't work really well.
Right.
It's like, all right, you have an infant. It's like, well, now we have the baby version. It's like, we have an intubated patient, but they can otherwise look at you and follow commands, which does happen. I have been on intubated patients who are sitting there with a tube hanging out of their throat, just kind of looking around and giving thumbs up, which is crazy to me, but it does happen. You know, so anyway, all right. So moving on, the cow absolutely agrees with you. And so cow decides that they're going to go ahead and do the OPQRST thing, but they don't quite flex that PIC muscle the way you do. And this is where I really feel for cow, because at this point, goat steps in. Remember, goat is in their class. And apparently cow took about 30 seconds too long. And so goat kind of condescendingly comes in and be like, hey, do you want to delegate vital signs and the 12 lead to us? Right? Yeah. And so cow's like, yes. And so then Junior, to further flex on cow, then delegates the 12 lead to Turkey. So now Junior's like commanding the lead as well. It's anyway, there's redemption to come, though. Don't worry. All right. So that first set of vital signs, Spence. Oh, go ahead.
And I want to point out, this is a really common thing in an internship, because like for the longest time, you were kind of like in classes and stuff. You're kind of told like you have to do it. You got to do it. Show me you're doing it. Show me the skills. And then you go out into the field and you start doing all the skills. And so there's this natural tendency to kind of continue doing that and to feel the need to like, well, I need to do the 12 lead and I need to do this while your partners kind of stand around going like, well, he's really not getting this PIC thing yet, is he?
Good point. All right. You ready for those vital signs?
Oh, yeah. Let's hit them.
Before we get to that, let's talk about this episode's sponsor, Jump Medic. So if you've been considering a premium first aid kit, but have been turned off by some of the quite frankly unjustifiable prices out there, then you should consider getting a Jump Medic Pro. Comparable kits go for $400, and I am using the term comparable very, very loosely. Jump Medic kits just have equipment that the others don't have. You've got a CBG kit, a blood pressure cuff, things that actually allow you to assess a patient that for some odd reason is missing in the competition. It sells for $279, and you can get 10% off of that using the EMS 2020 promo code. Also, you can check out the Jump Medic Elite or even design your own kit with the Build-A-Bag function. And whatever kit you choose, you can keep it stocked year-round with a $99 per year subscription, which comes down to just 27 cents a day. So check out jumpmedic.com, use the promo code EMS 2020, and be prepared for just about anything. All right, vital signs, blood pressure 141/83, heart rate is 51, that's 51, respiratory rate is 20 and currently described as unlabored. Lung sounds is diminished in the lowers, very diminished is what the report was.
What size patient do we have, by the way?
The patient's actually fairly skinny. So they do the 12 lead, and Spence, I don't have the 12 lead handy.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Hopefully in future episodes of Push Dose, we'll be able to just display the 12 lead here, but I don't have that right now.
That would be nice.
But what you can imagine, Spence, is you can imagine elevation in V1, V2, V3, and then some elevation in V4. What would that make you concerned about, Spence?
I mean, so the quick answer there is I'd be worried that what I'm looking at is a STEMI or an occlusive MI.
Yeah.
There is more than just ST elevation to factor in, but that would be the thing that jumps out to me.
If this was an MI, what area would this indicate?
This would be a septal anterior MI.
And my big concern about a lot of septal anterior MIs is the LAD. Yeah. So that's the left anterior descending. They call it the widowmaker. It's just it supplies blood to the left side of the heart. And the left side of the heart is the part with the left ventricle that pumps blood out to everything. And you don't want that to stop working. Your left ventricle it's there are many children of the heart, right? You've got your right atrium, your right ventricle, your left atria, and your left ventricle. And we love them all.
We love them all, but left ventricle just a little more. Left ventricle is who you brag about first to your friends. Go on. All right.
Cal gets some redemption from Goat's earlier I don't know, intervention there. In the sense that Goat looks at the 12 lead and says, oh, not a STEMI. To which both Cow and Turkey go, no, it's a STEMI. The student that kind of recently almost trounced him immediately started backpedaling like, oh, yeah, I definitely see what you guys are looking at. But I guess it was just very obvious. And so they just weren't looking. And so it's just one of those things where
don't flex. This is the rule. Just don't flex. Just do your job. Don't flex.
Do your job.
Because then the Schadenfreude,
I have no idea.
Doesn't exist. Like it makes me happy when somebody tries to, like be a dick and then they get dick.
Cal starts going down the OPQRST route. But before we get too far in that, Spence, why don't you go ahead and break down OPQRST I as well, since you want to add the I in there, which is actually really cool.
So this is one that I actually was recently corrected on very far into my career. Onset, as it turns out, is not, hey, when did symptoms start for you?
Yeah.
It's actually, hey, tell me about the onset. What were you doing? What was the pain, the pain, shortness of breath, the complaint like at onset? It's actually more along that versus hey, what time did this start?
Right.
So then we go into provokes. Provokes is like, hey, does anything make your pain better or worse? For instance, there is some pain that gets worse when you sit up or when you lay down, or there is, or your shortness of breath gets worse sitting up, sitting down, or moving, like, hey, moving really makes my shortness of breath more short of breath.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, good. That's good to know. That's actually really useful information. Then we go to Q. Q is quality. Hey, tell me about your pain. What is your pain like? Is it a, achy pain? Is it a dull pain? Is it a sharp stabbing pain? Is it localizable? Or is it sort of, it's in this area, that's all really useful information as well. Radiates is really like, hey, does your pain travel anywhere? So chest pain, oftentimes, cardiac chest pain can radiate up into the jaw or down the left arm. Sometimes it can radiate over to the right side. There are injuries with internal organs that can actually present with shoulder pain. And so it's really good to ask the patient if their pain goes anywhere.
So this is also one of those things. I'm going to cut in really quick here. This is also kind of a good time to really nail down exactly where the pain is. Because a lot of times patients will say, oh, I have chest pain. Well, some patients will say they have chest pain, but what they really mean is upper abdominal pain, or they really mean something like that. So the way I like to approach this question is I like to say, hey, point where your pain is the worst. And then, they'd be like, oh, it's, right here. Cause, I assume chest means substernal, but that doesn't mean the same thing for everybody else. And it's like, okay, does it radiate or move anywhere from there? And then they can tell you from there. That can really be important. If you have a pinpoint spot in your chest over off to the side, that could be something entirely different. If it's kind of upper abdominal and not really chest, that could also be something entirely different. So I like to add that in during radiates. So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
You're on a roll, brother.
Point of tenderness. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. All right. So then you go to severity. Severity is essentially just like, hey, on a scale of 0 to 10, how bad is this pain or this complaint?
Right.
And here's the thing. It's sort of like improv, like the rules don't matter.
Yeah.
Really, like, this is sort of a, like, hey, where are you at? Has it, like when it started, was it a 1 and now it's a 10?
Sure.
And this is also sort of a barometer for your treatments and your interventions. If somebody's at a 10 out of 10 chest pain and then you give them a nitro and it drops to a 1, like, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And, this isn't one where people, I think, oftentimes are like, well, he says it's a 10, but he's just sitting there on his phone.
Yeah.
People deal with pain in different ways. So
absolutely.
Like, don't go like, well, that's obviously not a 10.
It doesn't
these
really
10s
matter,
are their number. Yeah, it's they get to pick the number, and we just kind of use that to guide treatments going forward.
Yeah, and there's kind of two ways to deal with that person if they come up and they say like, hey, well, I'm a 10 out of 10, but they're clearly not truly a 10 out of 10 because 10 is the world's worst pain. And if you're on your phone, trust me, there is a level of pain that we can create, if we're sadistic, that would make it to where you could not focus on your phone. Give me some fire. We could do that. But it's not really important. So the way I usually like to add that is instead of trying to tell them to tell me their pain's an 8, because that's a little bit, that might put you at odds with somebody unnecessarily. And remember, you're not really going to change their opinion of their own pain. So what I like to do is I just like say, hey, okay, if that ends up going higher, like an 11 or a 12, you can go outside the scale. It's totally cool with me. I mostly just want to know our starting point. Just tell them that. And that way, if it does increase, they'll give you the 11 or 12. And you also you're not telling someone how they feel. So that's the way I like to approach that, is if someone gives it a 10 out of 10 and I'm like, yeah, this isn't a 10. You didn't. And here's the thing. It's not that they're lying. They just really don't understand what you're asking necessarily. They're thinking like, like you give me a 10 out of 10. I think it's a 10 because it's dominating my thoughts right now. I'm trying to distract myself with my phone or whatever. I'm calling it a 10 out of 10. Yeah. In my mind, as an EMS professional, I'm thinking of the worst pain I've ever seen somebody in. Well, keep in mind, our perspective is pretty messed up, okay? We've seen people on fire, missing limbs, and all these things. So my version of a 10, based on what I've seen, is just going to be plain different. We're different people. Yeah. So instead of telling someone how they feel, give them the option to go to a new scale if it gets worse.
Absolutely.
I think it's the easiest way to go. All right. T.
All right. Yeah. T is time. And this is where, you go, hey, how long has this been going on for? And this is also where you can ask them like, hey, has it gotten worse over time? Has it gotten better over time? If you didn't catch that in the severity portion, again, like more than anything, this is just a tool. This is an outline of questions to help you kind of build the history of present illness.
Right.
So if you want to, like me, insist that onset is, well, tell me when it started. You can. It doesn't matter.
Knock out two birds with one stone. Just don't forget to ask the actual onset question.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can ask like, hey, how long has this been going on for? And then also, this is a great, easy way to kind of segue into. So, and my understanding is you have a history of this. Is that correct? And then that allows them to expand into their history with, this complaint or this condition.
All right.
Or just, give you I was born in 1964.
This is the perfect opportunity. Whenever you ask, when did this all start? God, that's the perfect opportunity to hear a lot of stuff you really don't need to hear. Or maybe you do need to hear. But anyway. Yeah. All right.
My mother was a virgin and my daddy was a pastor. Cool.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Wow.
All right. Well, Spence, this is actually where the call starts to go awry as the patient answers those questions, starts down this direction and gets as far as O before things go off the rails. I'm now going to read
off the rails.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it stands for. I'm now going to go ahead and read you guys everything per the call submission in the words of Cal. So, all right. O. For onset. I asked what they were doing when the chest pain and shortness of breath started. The patient only stated that the shortness of breath was new today, but I just said okay and moved on. So for O, you have shortness of breath started today. P. I asked the patient if anything makes it better or worse. He said the pain had been getting gradually worse and doing anything more than watching TV makes the shortness of breath worse. For quality, I asked him to tell me about the pain, what it feels like, and he responded with, the pain feels like pain.
Mm-hmm.
For R for radiates, I literally asked him if his shortness of breath radiated anywhere. He's
all right.
It's one of my favorites. Yeah. He told me he didn't know what I meant, which was fair. Then I asked him if his chest pain went anywhere, like his arm or his jaw. He said that his left shoulder always hurts from a previous surgery and it hurts more today, but he thinks he just slept on it weird. By the way, I imagine the shortness of breath thing was just nerves and accidentally saying that instead of chest pain. I don't think they actually...
Well, I'm gonna ask you something that might surprise you.
Yeah.
Has Cow checked his CBG?
Cal has...
Has Cow checked his own CBG today?
Cal has not checked his own CBG. Well, maybe they did. I don't know. They didn't report it in this, though. And CBG does not end up coming up in this. So for S, for severity, I asked him to rate the pain on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being nothing, 10 being the worst imaginable pain. He said, it's really not that bad. Alligator worries about everything too much. It has been much worse before. I asked him when it started, and he replied with, it's been off and on for some time. So at this point, I kind of froze, asked the patient if they had any allergies to aspirin. Turkey then pretty much took the call over from here. So Spencer, what do you think about those answers?
So I actually am going to parrot something that you said, which is he asked questions and then just accepted whatever answers were given.
Correct.
Without actually looking for the answers.
Now, I've talked about this on the podcast EMS 2020. That's what Spencer's referring to. But, and again, it depends on the school. Some schools are great out there. But sometimes people get taught to ask questions, not get answers. And that's a very different kind of thing, right, Spence? I mean, that's you kind of get with this. And so, like, for example, the onset, he just said, well, the shorter breath was new today. Well, I didn't really answer the question.
No.
So, and then we go down to, and then kind of, and I'm like you, Spence, I think of onset and time as kind of together. So I that's the one thing I don't like about OPQRST is that they are, the O and the T are too far apart. But he said it's been off and on for some time. Well, what does that mean? I mean, he probably has a previous history of this just based on the conversation we're having. Does he mean off and on for some time? As in over the last couple of years, he's had several heart attacks? Does he mean for a week? Does he mean for an hour? We don't know. He didn't really rate it on the severity scale. He just said not that bad and just kind of ended up moving on. So this is kind of one of those things where clarification is truly needed.
There are definitely, like, in this situation, we have the 12 lead. So we have a 12 lead that says STEMI. So the questions kind of become a little more, in some way, a little more moot.
Right.
But in other calls, like, even in this call, like, it's still important to ask questions and then probe the answers. One, it demonstrates that you're listening.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure the patient like later will be like, well, I told him the pain felt like pain and he didn't ask me for any more.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, and
maybe
I think
he didn't care.
Whenever
like,
I have a patient, because I've gotten that answer from patients before, and I think it's they don't really understand the question. They're just like, what do you mean? What does pain feel like? It's pain. And then you have to kind of clarify. Because I think at the beginning of this, we started out like, hey, you need to ask open-ended questions, and you do. But sometimes you need to come back with pointed questions. And that's a good time to be like, all right, well, what I mean by that is it stab me? Is it dull? Like, does it feel does it feel like a pressure? Does it feel like someone like stabbed you? Like those kind of things. Does it feel like a burn, like heartburn? Like, what's it feel like? And kind of get them to describe that. Sometimes you get patients, especially those that are kind of, this patient kind of seems to me like someone that doesn't really want to answer your questions, or just kind of wants to get this over with. And so sometimes it can be important to be like, hey, how you answer that question can actually be really important to treatments we do down the line. So I know it seems like a silly question, but this is why I need it, and get them on your side about why you're asking questions. So especially if they start seeming like, hey, you're just accosting me with your stupid questions. So after Turkey kind of steps in, these are the actual answers to that. So I'm going to kind of explain onset and time together. When the patient said it's been off and on, he did indeed mean off and on for years. And it turns out the patient has had previous STEMIs as well, or previous MIs as well. This current one, this is kind of where experience kind of comes in, is you'll say off and on for years. Okay, what do you mean by off and on for years? And then he says, or what do you mean by off and on? He says, well, off and on for years. This is where the experience steps in and says, okay, so let's talk about this chest pain you're having currently. Tell me about this one. What were you doing when this started? And then how long ago was that? And the answer to that was, he goes, I don't remember what I was doing. I think I just woke up with it 3 days ago and was just kind of hoping it would go away. It didn't go away. I took one nitro tab 3 days ago and it didn't help, but I haven't done anything since. And that's, by the way, where your I comes in. We didn't talk about that. I for intervention. What have you done to try and make this better? And that can actually give you a lot of clues to the patient's mindset. Like, what do they think it is? They have a lot of experience with their own body. So the things they do can be really telling sometimes. So anyway, so there's that. As far as anything making it better or worse, specifically the chest pain, it's been a pretty constant increase. The quality of it is the patient does describe it. The patient actually described it as sharp, which I know a lot of people are used to, like, okay, but cardiac chest pain is typically dull. This patient said it was sharp. That's all. That's what I have. And some patients, that's just the way for me. Radiates. He did actually answer that one the first time pretty well. Like, yeah, my left shoulder hurts, but I think that's from sleeping on it wrong. And then the severity, he ended up giving it he said 5 or a 6. So,
Okay.
by the way, when patients give me that, I just say, all right, well, let's just call it a 6 for now, or 5. I don't care. Pick one. Let's just call it a 5 for now. And then just let me know if it goes up or down from a 5. We agree on that. He says, yeah, sure, 5. That's what I would say. I don't know if that's what was said here. That's how I would handle that. So that kind of answers your OPQRST. So I think the next move for this patient, to get this patient along, is kind of start working on treatments and start getting a patient history by using the sample or ample. You got signs and symptoms, that's the S, right? Well, that's your assessment, right? I mean, everything we've been told that's going on by this guy, we have the subjective part, we have our assessment, that kind of takes care of the S. And then the S will also get kind of filled in by other things in the sample history. A, allergies. Do you have any allergies to medications? What can we not give you? And you really want to know that up front. Get a list of medications. Then you have P. Okay, A, M, now you have P. That's past pertinent medical history. But the pertinent medical history part is important. Like, hey, have you had this chest pain before? What did it end up being? Tell me about that. That's really important. But this is also a good time to get other medical histories as well, because as much as patients know their own bodies, and they really do, they are a great source of information for their own struggles. Patients also don't have a medical degree. They also don't have, not every paramedic necessarily has a degree either, but they don't have any medical training necessarily. And so trying to get a more complete picture of their patient history is important. It may not be important right now on scene, but if you're able to get a list, if you're able to bring the source of that information, like the wife, with you so that it's available, it is important. So
I have an interloper. Hold on. Let me
do it. Who's your
get rid of this
interloper?
cat.
What's your cat's
Everyone
name?
loves that cat. This is Aurora.
I think people are going to be requesting the cat do this with me from now on. Just be me talking to a cat. All righty. So
what did you think, right meow?
Right. Meow, I think we should be talking about the L in sample history, which is last oral intake. What's the last thing you ate? Okay.
Yeah.
And that could be important, especially as we're talking about things like allergic reactions, as we're talking about things like abdominal pain, those kind of things. It's also good information if, surgery is very close down the road here, because we want empty stomachs. It can tell you a lot about airway protection concerns. If you just ate a big meal, that can definitely come back up. So those kind of things. And then events leading up to, which you may have already gotten in the onset. You got to remember, a lot of times when we're going over things like sample history, it's not saying you have to ask these questions. It's just a checklist to make sure you got them. So if you're if you feel really confident about events leading up to it, you don't have to ask again. The patient's going to look at you like, I just fucking told you the whole story, dude. Just bear in mind, look at it as a checklist, not necessarily an instruction sheet. So, Spence, what kind of treatments would you want to do?
The minute that 12 lead comes back and says STEMI, what I'm thinking of is prioritizing getting to definitive care, which is the cath lab hospital, that, since hospital choice isn't an issue, is definitely the closest hospital to this patient.
Very good.
And then the rest of those treatments are happening kind of under that priority, like out. Yeah. Yeah. So essentially it's all right. Oh, we have a STEMI. Let's notify the cath lab. Let's get this patient moving, and everything else can follow kind of after that. Defib pads, vascular access, giving the patient nitro, aspirin, etc. Those would be that would be kind of my flow. So I'm curious. It sounds like they were on scene. They've asked these questions. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to kind of time. Like maybe the 12 lead came after they got, hey, what past medical history do you have? I'm hoping that they're heading out the door soon. Yeah.
In this case, the 12 lead came on right when they were kind of doing the OPQRSTs simultaneously. So what specific treatments, though? So now that you're moving out the door, what specific treatments would you want to do for this patient? For this chest pain patient?
So, I mean, remind me what their blood pressure was.
141/83.
Okay, good. So, I mean, I'd like to get aspirin on board, ASAP.
Nice.
Yeah.
ASA, by the way, is short for aspirin for people that don't know. So there's that.
If you can say the actual drug name, I'll be very impressed.
Aspirin?
No, the actual generic name.
Oh, it's salicylic acid. Salicylic acid.
Yes. Yep. All right. There you go. All right. Cool.
I don't know if I pronounced that right. We'll find out in editing.
For the win, yes! LeBron James!
My treatments would essentially be, aspirin, nitro, maybe some fentanyl if nitro doesn't help their pain.
Sure.
Oxygen if they need it. If not, no oxygen. And then it's, going quickly to the cath lab that I have, done my best to give them the most notice. and transmit. Defib pads are always a good call. If you're particularly asking me about the heart rate.
Yeah, just what do you think about it? Because I know some people are going to look at it, because technically it's bradycardic, right? It's below 60. And if you look at AHA guidelines for unstable bradycardia, bradycardia with chest pain is technically unstable.
Yeah.
Does this anything you want to do about this or what?
I wouldn't. And here's why. Sometimes bradycardia is a protective measure that the heart takes, because it's going like, hey, I'm not able to, I am hurting for oxygen, and the more pumping I have to do, the more oxygen I require to do it. It's like going to Harvard without any money. Right. It's hard to go to classes and be the proud child that we want the left ventricle to be. So what I would say is this would be one I would probably let more signs of perfusion guide this. And so far, I haven't heard the patient's skin.
Skin color was fine, but patient was somewhat diaphoretic. Okay. Also, point to note, this is in a part of the country where it is always hot. They call wintertime preheating. So anyway. So yeah, it's always hot. So
kill him now is what I'm hearing. Because it's 80 degrees and I'm already upset.
Yeah. So no, it's generally a warm place. So everyone's kind of sweaty, but anyway.
Long story short, I wouldn't treat the heart rate at this point, given their stable blood pressure. If their blood pressure dropped, or they, their skin turned really pale and, et cetera, there were more indications of, oh, he's not getting perfused by that rate of 50. That might be one where then you could reconsider that. But at this point, I'm hoping they didn't pace him or give him atropine.
When you increase heart rate, you increase a sick heart demand for oxygen. And those cells that are currently dying that can't really get any oxygenation, you can make that problem worse with them because they can't get more oxygen, but you're going to sit there and work them. So you really have to consider, what are you doing that for? And there are reasons to do that. Like you mentioned, if the patient's, severely hypotensive, what we have to remember is that hypotension impacts the heart and its own ability. And that hypotension in and of itself will make things much worse for the heart. So if the patient is getting hypotensive, then yes, it may be worth it to increase the speed of the heart for this patient. But in this case, this patient is not hypotensive. So I'll go ahead and just round off the call really quick, and I'll just kind of answer this patient's ample history. For allergies, they have penicillin, sulfa, and Tylenol. For the medications they take aspirin, carvedilol, Plavix, lisinopril, Lasix, hydrocodone, Spiriva, which is an inhaler for COPD. They have an albuterol inhaler. They take gabapentin, and they take insulin. For their medical history, they have hypertension. They've had several previous MIs. He's had stents placed as well. Congestive heart failure with pedal edema, and COPD, type 2 diabetes also. Goat ended up administering the aspirin and nitro to this patient. They give nitro tabs here. They don't have IV nitro, at least not for chest pain. They have an IV nitro protocol for pulmonary edema patients, but not for chest pain patients. Cow goes to start a line, but is reminded by Turkey that, hey, you're the PIC. Don't get your head underwater, which, by the way, is an EMS 2020 thing. When you're PIC, you want to try and stand back. Don't get tied up in interventions because it can really shrink your view of what's going on. So that's, sometimes you have to. Resources may demand you do it, but if you can avoid it, you should avoid it. They call a STEMI activation. The transport is only 11 minutes with their lights and sirens. 12 lead is transmitted. They have transmitting capabilities here. The patient is seen very briefly in the ER before being whisked away to the cath lab, and they did indeed have a LAD occlusion, got another stent placed. At this time, we don't know if the patient's been discharged, but last I heard, the patient's doing fine and recovering.
Hey, all right.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching our first episode of Push Dose. We really hope that this is something that fills that gap between episodes of EMS 2020. And for those of you that haven't listened to EMS 2020 yet, we hope that you enjoyed it all the same. If you don't listen to EMS 2020, it is our podcast. It's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's everywhere.
We're everywhere.
EMS 2020 is one of the most popular podcasts in regards to EMS, so please go check us out. Of course, visit our sponsor, Jump Medic, at jumpmedic.com. If you like this video, click like. If you like the channel, go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to make sure you don't miss a thing, click that bell icon. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.